You're helping out, good. Where Paul landed before going to Jerusalem? Caesarea. So this is his return to Palestine and the eastern end of the Mediterranean. Route of Paul's second missionary journey. First one is what? Antioch. Second is Galatia. Third, Troas. Fourth, Philippi. Fifth, Thessalonica. Sixth, Berea. 7, 8, Corinth. 9, Ephesus. 10, Caesarea. 11, Jerusalem. And 12, back to base, Antioch. All right, very good. All right, Nancy, place Paul began third journey. Antioch of Syria. How many of his 3 missionary journeys began at Antioch?
3.
All 3 of them. All right, very good. Card 65, home of Apollos, Alexandria. What do you remember from Alexandria last week? Anything? It's the top of Africa, top of Egypt, top of Africa. What else? What was located there? A great library, greatest library in the world, around 200, 300 BC, maybe still at that time. Great university. It was said there were 100,000 Jews living there, many of them associated with the library and the university, and probably worked as scribes translating those books. All right, home of Apollos. Oh, that's what I just did. Alexandria. Number 66, Apollos went from Ephesus to Achaia or Greece. All right, so that was after he taught at Ephesus. It was corrected by Aquila and Priscilla. Then he went to Achaia in Greece. Card 67, Paul rebaptized men at Ephesus. 68, heard the word while Paul was at Ephesus. All in Asia, all right? And we'll kick that off just a second by looking at this map of the second missionary journey. I'm going to see if I can pull it off down here. Let me get this going. Because this map is a little easier to see about one of the things I was talking about last week. So it says right there that all in Asia heard Paul. So that doesn't mean Asia Minor in this case, I think. This is all of Asia Minor, right? All the way around over to here. This is Asia Minor. But this area right here, where this red line goes through here, all the way up to here, that's Asia, okay? And that includes all these cities right here, and it includes these 4 sub-areas of Korea, Lydda, Phrygia, which was this area out in here, and I got to think about this one, Mysia. This is Mysia. All right? So when it said all in Asia heard Paul, that means everybody in this area here had an opportunity to hear. All right? So when we get to our 12th lesson, we'll be talking about the 7 churches of what? Asia. They're not Asia Minor. They're the 7 churches of Asia. They will all be here. And some of those will be Ephesus, Smyrna, Thyatira, and Pergamum. And 3 more. Not on this map. Okay, does that make sense?
It's not Asia as we know it today.
No, Asia as we know it today is way over there. But at this time, they call this Asia. All right? And what I was reading today, we refer to it in Bible literature as Asia Minor, but I think it was not necessarily so much referred to it then. But that's how we refer to it. All right? So you have to understand, and I made this point last week looking at Acts chapter 16, verse 6. And this is in the second missionary journey. It said, now when they had gone throughout Phrygia and the region of Galatia. Galatia is this region right here, all right, which included Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, and Antioch. Then, in the region of Galatia, we were forbidden of the Holy Ghost to preach the word in Asia. Okay, so Paul was going to, after he was here, he was going to go throughout this region, but he was forbidden, told to go to Troas. All right, so that my point is that word Asia in chapter 16, verse 6, is that area right here. Okay? That's kind of a splitting hair deal, I know, but when we get to the 7 churches of Asia, it will be these 7 churches that are all located in Asia right there. Yes, sir. Yeah. So Rome is the one that called this Asia. Of course, Rome's the empire now. So it was a Roman province. And not only is it a Roman province, but one of these cities was kind of supposed to be capital, but by this time, Ephesus has become the de facto capital, and the Roman governor resides in Ephesus. And Ephesus is the 3rd or 4th largest city in the world at this time we're studying. So it was very important to Rome, once again, because of all that commerce that that came from Mesopotamia over here, and beyond that, India and China and everywhere else over there, okay? All that stuff flowed through Antioch. A little of it flowed through Caesarea Philippi and Damascus and out to this coast, but most of it came overland to Antioch, then up to Tarsus, through the Cilician gates and on over into Asia. Right? So Rome was worried. They were very careful with this area because it provided a lot of wealth and stuff to the empire. There were also don't want to go too far into it, I guess, but there were also a lot of, many of these cities were quite wealthy sometime before the 1st century, especially in the Grecian Empire. There was a lot of gold and other metals and stuff mined out of there before then. And some of that was still going on by this time in the Roman Empire. So this area was economically important to Rome. That's why they were interested in it. And that's why there were this was heavily populated with lots of cities that were large for that time. All right? So what we just went through there, this is the 2nd missionary journey. Cletus, my pointer's kind of weak. Maybe I need batteries, but so the 2nd missionary journey began in Antioch, went to Tarsus, then to Derbe, Lystra, Iconium, Antioch, Troas, Philippi, Thessalonica, Berea, and Paul went to Athens, which we looked at extensively last week. Then to Corinth, where he spent a year and a half. He departs from Centuria right here, sails to Ephesus, 225 to 250 miles. From there he goes, and he only stays about a week, goes from there to Caesarea, and he goes down to Jerusalem. I believe it was the Pentecost or Passover, but I believe it was Pentecost. And then he goes back up to where he started, Antioch, completing the 2nd journey. All right? Then in the middle of this lesson, we transition over to the 3rd missionary journey or tour. Starting from where, Nancy? Antioch. All right. Antioch, and he goes overland again, back to Tarsus, through those Cilician gates. Max and Nancy and I were talking about these. This area right here is a very high mountain range right through here, 10,000 to 13,000 feet, many of these mountains. So the only reasonable pass through there is this mountain pass between these 2 parallel bars there, known as the Cilician gates. Then he went to Iconium, Antioch, and then over to this week's lesson to Ephesus. All right? That make sense? So this is going to be if we count the first missionary tour, this is going to be the third time that he's going to go through and visit this area right here. At least the third time, and then the second time on into these other parts over here next to the Aegean Sea. All right. Okay. All right. Backing up a little bit further, just because I stumbled onto this and we did more pictures tonight than anything else. This goes back to Paul's conversion, but I wanted to show you Damascus. This is a map of ancient Damascus. Much of this has been excavated, but remember, Paul was blinded right on the road to Damascus, and then he went to a residence on the street called Straight. If you remember that, also known as Straight Street in Damascus. And it can be found today, I'm told, if you go there. The pointer's giving me fits, but it can be found today if you go there. And I wanted you to see that. All these cities, of course, this is AD 50, about where we are now. And from the year from Alexander's conquering the world, including Palestine and everything else we've been studying, in about 300 and something BC, up until the Romans took over in about BC 64, all this was under Greek control. So that's why there are why these theaters were built. Greeks built some, Romans built more, I think. There are agoras in just about every one of these places. You can't see it, but if you look down from the top, on the right-hand side there, you can see agora. That was a Greek market. They were still in use in Roman times. So there were Greek and Roman influences all over these cities. If you look at here, this is Antioch of Syria. Try to get my pointer going here. One more time. I ain't got enough power. All right. So over here, this is Antioch of Syria, and I've already lost it. All right, you can see the river that runs through here is the Orontes River. You can see at the top where it says Orontes. If you remember, Antioch was on the Orontes River. It runs down to the coast. And if you look on the lower left hand, you'll see it says to Cilicia, whatever. That's the road that also runs down to the Mediterranean to the town of Cilicia, where they left on the first missionary tour when they went by ship across the Mediterranean to Asia Minor. All right. So here is a city. Here's an artist rendition of Corinth in the time of Paul. So somebody drew this up based on excavations that are made. Some of the things that we mentioned were so this is Corinth, and these things that look like streets, I think, are separating blocks. So those are city blocks in the little smallest grids, I think. Those aren't one house, they're a block. Because remember, Corinth had, we said Sunday, had 300,000 citizens perhaps, and 400,000 slaves or so at the time Paul was there. So it was a very, very large city. Down here on the map on the right side, down toward the bottom, you can see the temple of Aphrodite. We mentioned that. She was the goddess of love. Thank you very much. Aphrodite here, the temple of Aphrodite would have been right here. She was the goddess of love, and we mentioned that at one point, possibly before Paul was there, I wasn't sure from what I was reading, it had so-called 1,000 prostitutes. All these temples to idols wound up with immoral practices, every one of them. None of them were moral, they were completely immoral, and that's just how it was. We mentioned Centria, so this is the road that goes towards Centria, which is the coast, right? And this goes to Lechion, or whatever this is. This is to the eastern coast, and this is to the western coast. All right? And then I'll point out over here, so this square here is from this little inset right here at the center of the city of Corinth, right? So there are all kinds of temples in here to idols, including one here that's the temple of Apollo. And we talked about what he was the god of. Anybody remember what Apollo is the god of? Can't remember. We mentioned that last week when I read the list. This is the theater, which was right here. And there's an Erastus Paul mentions in a chapter or two later who's a Christian. And this guy was the treasurer of the city of Corinth. And so people believe that he was converted. Paul mentioned him being with Timothy or somebody sent to preach somewhere. That's the theory, at least. All right? So right here is the ruins of the Temple of Apollo, which we just saw on that previous map, right? Temple of Apollo was right here. That is its ruins, what's left of it. It was way out here, a huge, enormous temple. So that's what the countryside of Corinth looks like around the isthmus there. All right, here's a photo. This is the isthmus, right? Right here. Corinth was somewhere around here. Centria was down here, and the other place that begins with an L was up here. I think the modern cities are here and here, I believe. So this right here is the canal that Gina and Nita saw when they were over there. So this tremendous canal right here that was dug in modern times, taking some 100 years to dig. I say modern, like in the 1800s or something like that. All right? And so this is to the east or toward Palestine, toward Asia Minor over here. And so when Paul sailed from Corinth to Ephesus, he left here and went across to Ephesus. Also pointed out that it was said that they took they frequently, before this canal was built, they would take ships and pull them across this landmass, which is 5 to 7 miles or 8 miles, whatever it said. Pull them across and drop them in this other side. Apparently going around this thing was very dangerous, very rocky. So frequently they would just pull the ships across before that channel was built. Here's a picture of how the channel looks today, right? And I forgot, large modern ships can't go through here. So only what would be considered small ships today, large when this was built, no doubt. It's 100 and something feet up these walls I read somewhere. So it's pretty steep. When they built this, they have lots of earthquakes, as I'd mentioned in that, and this limestone was flake off, fall off, fill the channel, then have to clean it back out. Big mess. All right. There's a picture of a not very large boat going through there. It does have bridges and roads and stuff across there today. All right. Any questions about Corinth that I can't answer before we move on? After that, Paul comes to Ephesus. All right, so he stays in Corinth a year and a half on this missionary tour, right? That's the second tour, right? And then he leaves there and he goes to Ephesus, but he only stays. He worships apparently on first day of the week in Ephesus, but then he leaves very soon. But when he comes from Corinth over here over to Ephesus, this is a river that I forget the name of, but it provided a harbor up near the city of Ephesus. So there's absolutely no doubt, because this is land all around here. All right? So Paul had to sail up this river, and all the ships docked in this harbor and get out in this harbor. He walked up the street to Ephesus that we'll look at in a minute. Today, this harbor has, over the centuries, has silted up. They've let all this land erode around here, and it filled up the harbor hundreds of years ago. So it's no longer a harbor. Okay? We'll look at a few minutes at pictures of the theater. So when you walk up this main thoroughfare, you come up to this gigantic theater, amphitheater. There were temples all over the place, all of these, to all of their idols, of course. And most importantly in Ephesus was the temple of Artemis, or the temple of Diana. Right? And so this temple was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. And I try not to read too much from other stuff because it puts me to sleep when people read, but you got to hear some of this. Just a little bit of it. The archaeological history of Ephesus began on May 2nd, 1863. So that was during our Civil War, when a British architect started his search for the Temple of Diana, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. He did not discover the ruins of the temple until 1869, which was 6 years later, and then worked 5 more years at the temple site. So I think he was digging in here, and that temple was kind of almost outside of the city. So it took him a while to figure that out. The temple platform up here was 239 feet wide, 408 feet long. So what would you scale that to, Cletus?
No clue.
Football field? How big is a football field? How many feet? How many?
300 feet.
300 feet long, but how many feet wide?
150.
120?
150.
150?
It's 50 by 100.
I thought it was 40 yards wide, make it 120.
You're talking Canadian.
Okay. Never mind. All right. Whatever. So the platform this temple was on was much larger than significantly larger than a football field. All right. That's the point. We'll have to figure out the width later. But Cleta thinks he knows. On that stood the temple itself. The temple measured 180 feet by 377 feet long. All right? So there was the platform, and then there was the temple itself, which is also bigger than a football field, 180 feet or 377 feet. So it was absolutely enormous. Its roof was supported by 117 60-foot columns. That means 60 foot high, 117 of them. The columns were 6 feet in diameter. These are limestone, of course, carved out. 36 of them were sculptured at the base with life-size figurines. And I've seen a picture of that. It's quite impressive, I have to say. They dug out a piece of one of them somewhere, and it's in I guess it's a British museum somewhere. They hauled it off to somewhere else. But it has carved in it these people in garb that looks like from ancient Greece. All right? That is most impressive. So people from all over the world came through Ephesus via these trade routes, and many of them went to the temple of Artemis or Diana. And I didn't point it out, but there's an Agora market here. This market was said to be 360 feet by 360 feet with shops all around. So it was an enormous place. I'm not sure about this stadium because it looks like a U, but most of the Romans built these stadiums, which they called circuses, for doing what? Chariot races. And Charlton Heston and Ben-Hur, right? That was the whole thing, racing the chariot around there. They did really race to the death or whatever, you know, I mean, it was brutal. So they had these, this looks like it's not closed on the other ends. It may not have been one, but when you look at a bunch of these maps, you'll see them all over the Roman world. They built those things everywhere. And the one in Rome, I guess, was the largest. It seated hundreds of thousands at its maximum ability. All right, this is the front facade that's left of the Celsius Library in Ephesus. So you've seen that, right? Jason Jones not here. He's seen it. He said he had pictures of it. But it was obviously quite a building, multi-storied. I can't tell if it's 2 or 3. This kind of gives you a better picture of the enormity of it, where if you look straight on, you can see they've got all these Greek women. Joey told me I could blow this up like that. Inset here, those stone carvings. But it must have been like it may have even been a 3-story, I don't know, 2 or 3-story, hard to say. But the rest of the building was destroyed. You know, there was a building behind it. It wasn't just a facade, a library that housed Ephesus' library. All right. Here, the next picture, this shows the amphitheater that we saw. I'm going to bounce back over here right quick. Amphitheater right here in the center of the city. All right. So that's what we're looking at right here, modern day photo, some tourist sitting here, but you can see how steep it was. All right, so it's very large. This area down here, which was the stage, and there was also a roof and building over all this, I think, where they prepared for their entertainment events or whatever. It was obviously used for large town gatherings, although there was another building in here that I can't probably remember the name of. There's another city building in here. I don't think it's on this thing, on this picture. All right. So here's the picture I really like. This gives you a little bit more of the idea of the enormity of this amphitheater. Obviously extremely large. It seated 25,000 people. There's no public address system, of course, so I couldn't speak there, but the idea is voice is carried, of course, really good on these stone amphitheaters. But I would have not been able to do it. All right, so we'll come back to that in just a minute. This right here is that main road, okay, running out. All right, that's what we were looking at on this picture right here. Main road, and there's another name for it, Joey, what did we look up a while ago? What have you forgotten? Me too. The main road that runs out to the harbor. So right here, this is the harbor that is now silted up. It's brown because it's full of dirt. Okay? So when the Apostle Paul came in from the Aegean Sea, his boat sailed right up here. He got off. He walked right up this way because that's the only way. Only harbor, only way to get in. He walked right up this road into the city of Ephesus a little less than 2,000 years ago. I'm quite impressed by that. I don't know if you are. Hope you are. But even more important, well, we'll come back to it in just a minute. I'll finish these pictures. We'll come back to this. And this is that marble street. You can see the library building, front of that library building right here. So if we go back to the map.
Hey, Jason.
Yes.
It's spelled the word cure.
Oh, Curitas.
So I think it's Curitas.
Curitas Street. Yep. Let's see if it says it on here, but it's Curitas Street or something. That's how Joey and I are pronouncing it, but who knows if that's how they pronounced it. So that's the street right here. It comes right along here. And the library's not on this map either. Oh, yeah, it is right here too. Library's right here, I guess. Maybe it's this street. Anyway, it's one of these streets. Comes right through there. All right, that's what this is. The street is marble now, and I think they said it was replaced in the 2nd century with this marble, so that a marble in that street Paul did not walk on. He walked on whatever stones they had there the century before that. All right, most of this other stuff, a lot of this other stuff does date back to the time of Paul. All right, I found that very interesting. Hope that was any comments or observations on that. So if we go back here to the amphitheater here, if you look at Acts chapter 19, Acts chapter 19, verse 23. And at that same time, there arose no small stir about that way. That's talking about Christianity, that way. For a certain man named Demetrius, a silversmith, which made silver shrines for Diana, brought no small gain from the craftsmen. So he is a silversmith who builds small personal idols for Diana, the giant idol, which was in the temple of Diana. All right? So he makes a hefty profit on this because this was one of the 7 wonders of the world, right? People came from Asia and Europe and everywhere else to see this, and they bought idols. They bought silver idols and maybe gold idols or whatever else they were selling, all right? So this was this was the thing to buy in Ephesus. Couldn't leave there without your Diana idol. Yes?
I think his time would have been better spent to put some guardrails in that thing. I'd take calls before I'd be walking up and down that.
Yes, well, yes. Who knows? I had the same thought. There's one in Rome, an amphitheater, where the lower seats, which had the most important dignitaries, actually had armrests, but it was only the lowest row. Everybody else was like this. Verse 25, whom he called together with the workmen of like occupation and said, Sirs, we know that by this craft we have our wealth. Moreover, you see and hear that not alone in Ephesus, but almost throughout all Asia, this Paul hath persuaded and turned away much people, saying that they be no gods which are made with hands. So Paul was preaching that these idols that you guys carved out of stone, that you guys made out of silver, these aren't really gods. All right? And he was convincing people by explaining the prophecy of Jesus in the Old Testament and showing that the Jesus of Nazareth who lived between BC 5 and AD 30 was the true God, not these idols of Diana that they crafted out of silver. In verse 27, he said, so that not only this our craft is in danger of being set at naught, but also the temple of the great goddess Diana should be despised, and her magnificence should be destroyed, whom all Asia and the world worshipeth. All right, so this temple was famous all over the world, the known world at that time. In verse 28, when they heard these sayings, they were full of wrath, that is, the people of Ephesus, right? And they cried out, great is Diana of the Ephesians. And in verse 29, the whole city was filled with confusion, and having caught Gaius and Aristarchus, men of Macedonia, Paul's companions in travel, they rushed with one accord into the theater. That theater right here. Okay? And when Paul would have entered into the people, the disciples suffered him not. So Paul was going to go in there and speak to them, but his friends wouldn't let him go in because they thought the people that were in a rage would probably tear him from limb to limb or stone him or whatever. They wouldn't let him go in. His friends wouldn't. And certain of the chief of Asia, which were his friends, sent unto him, desiring him that he would not adventure himself into the theater. Some therefore cried one thing, and some another, for the assembly was confused, and the more part knew not wherefore they were come together. And they drew Alexander out of the multitude, the Jews putting him forward, and Alexander beckoned with a hand, and would have made his defense unto the people. But when they knew that he was a Jew, all with one voice about the space of 2 hours cried out, great is Diana of the Ephesians. So they created an entire city uproar for 2 hours with this theater, possibly filled with 25,000 angry idol makers or whatever. So it causes quite a row here, all right? So then verse 35, the town clerk comes in and kind of soothes this over and gets everybody to settle down and eventually breaks up the assembly. And that's in the rest of the chapter, 35 through 41. It's very interesting that, to me, that this harbor, this street, this amphitheater was where Paul spent much of his time. Here in the third journey, first journey, he spends less than 2 weeks here. The third journey, he's going to spend a much longer time here, right? And then the theory is that much later, after Paul has probably already been martyred in Rome, the Apostle John will make his residence here until he is banished to the Isle of Patmos. So both Paul and John will spend much time here. The church here was apparently a pretty strong church that was established. Paul's going to write back the letter to the Ephesians to them, of course. And this church in Ephesus, part of Asia, will be one of the 7 churches of Asia that John writes to in the book of Revelation. All right? That kind of makes sense? Any comments or questions? Apollo was the god of sun and light. Yeah. 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 When you needed one, you just assigned some new attributes, probably. I mean, they were made with hands, right? They were made with the minds of people, so you can do whatever you want to do. All right? So that's good. And I think we didn't state it, but I read a list of the 12 most important gods last week or the week before, supposedly. But I think the Romans, when they took over the Grecian Empire in AD 64 or whatever, they tried to, a lot of the things of Grecian culture, the Romans just put a Roman name or varnish on. So they took many of those gods, gave them another name, and went from there, right? Took the same concept, basically. They just reused the gods to try to keep the Greek-speaking people and culture alive and kind of under the Roman thumb without getting them angry because they had to have a whole new set of gods, okay? Just put a little different name on them and spun them a little bit differently. All right? Okay, I think we're about done.
All right, we have a few belts to give out tonight. Mac has earned turquoise. On the wrong side. Yeah, what's up with that? Sadie, blue. She says she taught class tonight. Graydon, blue. And Lisa, Sadie said you got your belt tonight. So, Stella, blue. And Sarah, blue. And Kaylee, blue. Good job.
So this week, am I on, Howard? Okay, good. It's different, I guess, than the other one. Sounds different. Okay. So this week we discussed, finished up the second missionary journey of Paul, where he went into Asia Minor and then into Greece. And we began the third one where he goes again to Asia Minor, to Greece, spends much more time than he had on the other missionary tours. And by the end of this third missionary tour, Paul has helped to establish congregations all over Asia Minor, especially in the central part, which is Galatia, and in the western part, better known as Asia, where the 7 churches of Asia in Revelation would be called out later. There are obviously many congregations of Christians by this time, AD 53 to 55. Many congregations all over this area of Asia Minor. Paul has helped establish them with help from Silas, Timothy, Luke, numerous other people he calls out in the book of Acts. But these churches have some Jewish members, but they're in Gentile lands primarily, and increasingly, I'm sure the majority of people would have been Gentiles from those regions. I just think it's very interesting how that was God's plan. Obviously, when Paul went there, there were no churches, or maybe just a few, from people who had earlier left Jerusalem and spread Christianity back, but not much of an influence. And Paul goes there and has a great influence through what's basically about close to 10 years of his effort and the effort of many others to help him spread the gospel. Just like we would do today. Many congregations have been established in this country in some regions, especially here in Texas. A lot of congregations were established, and that's what New Testament Christianity is supposed to do, is to establish a congregation and then eventually reach out to others. How did they make these Christians? Well, same way we do today. They preached the word, taught in house to house and publicly, it says in Acts. They taught the gospel of Jesus Christ. Paul went everywhere showing that Jesus was the Christ because he fulfilled all prophecy from the Old Testament concerning him. He fulfilled it in his lifetime. Clearly, he was the Son of God. And then he was crucified and raised again from the dead, showing even further and even stronger that he was the Son of God. So how do we become Christians today? The same as then. We accept, believe him. Belief means the faith to act upon what the New Testament teaches. We hear the word, we repent of our sins, we confess Jesus, and we submit to baptism in order to have the remission of our sins. That's what they did. That's what Paul and his teaching companions did all over Asia Minor and then all over Greece following that. Same thing that we do today. there's anyone tonight who needs to submit to baptism, well, you can come in a few moments. If there are those who have publicly done wrong, to know that they need to make a public correction, then this would be a great time to do that as well. If you have any need, won't you come as we stand and sing?
The realms above, while the light on the throne shines for you and me, let us listen to the call of love. Zion's call is ringing, coming from the throne above. While we hear it ringing, let us see the call of love. While we tarry below, there is work to do, and our strength cometh from above. As we labor and wait, we must all be true. Let us listen to the call of love. Zion's call is ringing, coming from the throne above. While we hear it ringing, let us see the call of love. We'll sing the next song for closing song, after which we'll have a prayer and be seated for announcements. I stand amazed in the presence of Jesus the Nazarene, and wonder how he can love me, a sinner condemned unclean. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me. When with a ransom glory his face I shall see, 'twill be my joy through the ages to sing of his love for me. How marvelous, how wonderful, and my song shall ever be. How marvelous, how wonderful is my Savior's love for me.
Please pray with me. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for blessing us with this opportunity to come together tonight and to learn more about you. Please be with everyone who is sick or who is having surgery or is recovering from surgery. Please help for us all to spread your word during the week and to be faithful Christians. In your son's name pray. Amen.
It's good to see everyone here tonight. Thank you for making time to come out on this kind of ugly looking night out there, but good to see everybody. Just a couple of announcements just to make. Got a note from Catherine Ratcliffe today. She's a little bit under the weather. She caught something over the weekend. It's not COVID, she said. But she wanted me also to announce that Susan Turner, the prayer list for her family, is doing better after her chemo treatments, and things are moving along there and doing well. There is a wedding shower this weekend for, who is it? For Morgan and Eric. There is here at the building at 10:30 in the morning, a Saturday morning on May 1st. She's registered at Amazon if you haven't had a chance to pick up something yet. And then also, Max wanted me to let everybody know the twins are now up to 10 pounds apiece. Considering they were just over 4 when they came here, that's a pretty good jump. Max, if you and I gained weight that fast, we'd be in trouble, buddy. So glad to see they're doing well. And if you're in junior high and you did not say your cards, come and see me for a moment afterwards. Thank you. Y'all have a good night. We'll see you later. Come and see me, boy.